Sorry for the interruption. We were acting on the recommendation of the Federal Protective Service, but we can now reconvene. Where was I? Consider, too, that these are just the effects that our rules have had on the Internet of today. Now, think about how they'll affect the Internet that we need 10, 20 years from now. The digital world bears no resemblance to a water pipe or electric line or sewer. The use of those pipes will be roughly constant over time, and very few would say that there's dramatic innovation in those areas. By contrast, online traffic is exploding, and with the dawn of the Internet of Things, with the development of high bitrate applications like virtual reality, with new activities we can't fully grasp yet, like high-volume Bitcoin mining, we are imposing ever more demands on the network. Over time, that means that our networks themselves will have to scale too. But they don't have to. If our rules deter the massive infrastructure investment that we need, eventually we'll pay the price in terms of less innovation. Consider these words from Ben Thompson, a highly respected technology analyst, from a post on his blog Stratechery supporting my proposal. It's an extended quote, but with your indulgence, it's important. The question that must be grappled with is whether or not the Internet is done. By that I mean that today's bandwidth is all we will ever need, which means we can risk chilling investment through prophylactic regulation and the elimination of price signals that may spur infrastructure build-out. If we are done, then the potential harm of a Title II reclassification is much lower. Sure, ISPs will have to do more paperwork, but honestly, they're just a bunch of mean monopolists anyways, right? Best to get laws in place to preserve what we have. But what if we aren't done? What if virtual reality with dual 8K displays actually becomes something meaningful? What if those imagined remote medicine applications are actually developed? What if the Internet of Things moves beyond this messy experimentation phase and into real-time value generation, not just in the home, but in all kinds of unimagined commercial applications? I certainly hope we will have the bandwidth to support all of that. I do too. And as Thompson put it in another Stratechery post, and again I quote, "The fact of the matter is there is no evidence that harm exists in the sort of systematic way that justifies heavily regulating ISPs. The evidence does suggest that current regulatory structures handle bad actors perfectly well. The only future to fear is the one we never discover, because we gave up on the approach that already has brought us so far." Now remember, folks, networks don't have to be built. Risks don't have to be taken. Capital doesn't have to be raised. The cost of Title II today may appear, at least to some, to be hidden, but the consumers and innovators of tomorrow will pay a severe price. So, what is the FCC doing today? Well, quite simply, we are restoring the light touch framework that has governed the Internet for most of its existence. We are moving from Title II to Title I. Wonkier it cannot be. It is difficult to match that mundane reality to the apocalyptic rhetoric that we have heard from Title II supporters. And as the debate has gone on, their claims have gotten more and more outlandish. So let's be clear. Returning to the legal framework that governed the Internet from President Clinton's pronouncement in 1996 until 2015 is not going to destroy the Internet. It is not going to end the Internet as we know it. It is not going to kill democracy. It is not going to stifle free expression online. If stating these propositions alone doesn't demonstrate their absurdity, our Internet experience before 2015 and our Internet experience tomorrow, once this order passes, will prove them so. Simply put, by returning to the light touch Title I framework, we are helping consumers and promoting competition. Broadband providers will have stronger incentives to build networks, especially in unserved areas, and to upgrade networks to gigabit speeds and 5G. This means there will be more competition among broadband providers. It also means more ways that startups and tech giants alike can deliver applications and content to more users. In short, it is a freer and more open Internet. And we also promote much more robust transparency among ISPs than existed 3 years ago. We require ISPs to disclose a variety of business practices, and the failure to do so subjects them to enforcement action. This transparency rule will ensure that consumers know what they're buying and startups get the information they need as they develop new products and services. Moreover, we empower the Federal Trade Commission to ensure that consumers and competition are protected. 2 years ago, the Title II order stripped the FTC of jurisdiction over broadband providers. But today, we are putting the nation's premier consumer protection cop back on the beat. The FCC will once again have the authority to take action against internet service providers that engage in anti-competitive, unfair, or deceptive acts. As FTC Chairman Maureen Olhausen recently said, and I quote, "The FTC's ability to protect consumers and promote competition in the broadband industry isn't something new and far-fetched. We have a long-established role in preserving the values that consumers care about online." Or, as President Obama's first FTC chairman put it just yesterday, "The plan to restore FTC jurisdiction is good for consumers. The sky isn't falling, consumers will remain protected, and the internet will continue to thrive." So let's be clear. Following today's vote, Americans will still be able to access the websites they want to visit. They will still be able to enjoy the services they want to enjoy. There will still be cops on the beat guarding a free and open internet. This is the way things were prior to 2015, and this is the way they will be once again. Now, our decision today will also return regulatory parity to the internet economy. Now, some Silicon Valley platforms, giants, favor imposing heavy-handed regulations on other parts of the internet ecosystem. But all too often, they don't practice what they preach. Edge providers regularly block content that they don't like. When you go online, do you decide what news, search results, and products you see? Perhaps not. They regularly decide what you see and, perhaps more importantly, what you don't. And many thrive on the business model of charging to place content in front of eyeballs. What else is accelerated mobile pages or promoted tweets but prioritization? What is worse, there is no transparency into how decisions that appear inconsistent with an open internet are made. How does a company decide to restrict someone's accounts or block their tweets because it thinks their views are inflammatory or wrong? How does a company decide to demonetize videos from political advocates without any notice? How does a company expressly block access to websites on rival devices or prevent dissidents' content from appearing on its platform? How does a company decide to block from its app store a cigar aficionado app, apparently because the company believes that the app promotes tobacco use? You don't have any insight into any of these decisions, and neither do I. Yet these are very real, actual threats to an open internet. Ironic, coming from the very entities that claim to support it. Ironic, too, that so-called net neutrality advocates, most vigorously opposed to our reforms, have little to nothing to say about these threats. These are omissions. These are threats that a growing number of officials, Democrat and Republican, House and Senate, are beginning to take notice of. Now look, perhaps certain companies support saddling broadband providers with heavy-handed regulations because those rules work to their economic advantage. I don't blame them for taking that position. And I'm not saying that these same rules should be slapped on them too. What I am saying is that it is not the job of the government to be in the business of picking winners and losers in the internet economy. We should have a level playing field and let consumers decide who prevails. Now, many words have been spoken during this debate, but the time has come for action. It is time for the internet once again to be driven by engineers and entrepreneurs and consumers, rather than lawyers and accountants and bureaucrats. It is time for us to act to bring faster, better, and cheaper internet access to all Americans. It is time for us to return to the bipartisan regulatory framework under which the internet flourished prior to 2015. It is time for us to restore internet freedom. I want to extend my deepest gratitude to the staff who have worked so many long hours on this item. From the Wireline Competition Bureau, Anik Banoun, Joe Calishone, Megan Capasso, Paul Exech, Ben Childers, Nathan Egan, Madeline Findley, Doug Galby, Dan Kahn, Melissa Kirkle, Gail Krutov, Susan Lee, Ken Lynch, Pam Megna, Chris Monteith, Ramesh Nagarajan, Eric Ralph, Deborah Salons, Shane Taylor. From the Office of General Counsel, Ashley Boisel, Jim Carr, Christine Fargetstein, Tom Johnson, Doug Klein, Marcus Mayer, Scott Novak, Linda Oliver, and Bill Richardson. From the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, Stacy Ferraro, Nisha Gundelsberger, Garnet Hanley, Betsy McIntyre, Jennifer Salas, Paroma Sanyal, Jimmy Shang, Don Stockdale, and Peter Trachtenberg. From the Office of Strategic Planning and Policy Analysis, Eric Berger, Mark Bykowski, and Jerry Alec. From the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, Jerusha Burnett. From the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, Ken Carlberg. And from the Media Bureau, Tracy Walden. With that, we will call the vote. Commissioner Clyburn.
I dissent.
Commissioner O'Reilly.
Aye.
Commissioner Carr.
Aye.
Commissioner Rosenworcel.
I dissent.
The chair votes aye. The item is adopted with editorial privileges granted as requested. Thanks to the staff for your terrific work on this item. Madam Secretary, could you please announce the next item on today's agenda?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, the fifth item on your agenda will be presented by the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau and is entitled Amendment to Harmonize and Streamline Part 20 of the Commission's Rules Concerning Requirements for Licensees to Overcome a CMRS Presumption.